The Laundering, Volume 2, Case 33, The Credibility Test. A demand placed on survivors, and the funnel that demand ignores. Open the case. A note, this one concerns sexual violence.
3 sentences said to survivors so often they sound like common sense. Why don't you just go to the police? Why don't you report it? If you were really raped, you would press charges. Each treats reporting as the obvious, neutral thing, and treats not reporting as a quiet admission that nothing really happened. Set that demand beside the state's own measurements, and the common sense inverts. By Statistics Canada's figures, only about 6% of sexual assaults are ever reported to police. Of the ones that are, roughly 1 in 10 ends in a conviction. The path the demand calls obvious is one the justice system itself completes only rarely. This case is about what that demand does. It takes a documented institutional attrition and refiles it as a personal failing, disbelief, dressed as procedure.
Isn't this just a fight about whether survivors should report?
That is a real and human argument, and it is not the one this series runs. Strip it back, and a familiar grammar appears. A structural outcome read as an individual choice. The move from the poverty is policy addition, and the authority of the number problem of Case 24, where the lived is overruled by the official. Here it runs on a demand. Just report it presents the institution as a neutral pipe and the survivor as the variable, so that when the pipe does not deliver, the failure attaches to the person who walked into it.
And the premises?
4. 1. Reporting can matter. It can corroborate, it can stop a repeat offender, and some survivors find the process worth it. Grant it in full. 2. By the state's own data, the path from report to conviction is extremely narrow, and the process is frequently exhausting and re-traumatizing. 3. A demand that treats reporting as the neutral default and non-reporting as evidence the harm wasn't real ignores that. It places the system's documented attrition on the survivor as a credibility failing. 4. The spine. If you were really raped, you would press charges. Converts a structural outcome, a low-yield, often harmful funnel, into an individual credibility test. The relocation of the burden from institution to survivor is the laundering.
Start with the part that isn't in dispute. The numbers, from Statistics Canada.
First, reporting itself. By the 2019 General Social Survey, only about 6% of sexual assault incidents were reported to police, against 36% of physical assaults. Most of the harm never enters the system at all. Now follow the small share that is reported. Of police-reported sexual assaults in 2015 to 2019, roughly 36% resulted in charges. Of those, about 61% proceeded to court. Of completed court cases, just under half, 48%, ended in a finding of guilt. Multiply the funnel through, and only about 1 in 10 reported sexual assaults ends in a conviction. An earlier study, for 2009 to 2014, found 12%. The pattern is durable. 2 studies a decade apart describe the same narrow path.
And one number that answers a common retort?
Cases where the accused is a stranger have a lower charge rate, but are more likely to proceed and convict. Cases where the assailant is known to the victim, the large majority of sexual assaults, fare worse downstream. The closer the harm to the survivor's life, the steeper the path. Just press charges is hardest to honor exactly where the assault is most common.
What's the specimen?
1 conditional. If you were really raped, you would press charges. It does 2 things at once. It poses as a statement about procedure. The proper response to a real crime is to report it. And underneath, it is a statement about credibility. Your not reporting is taken as evidence the crime was not real. The procedure is the costume. The disbelief is the body.
Is it a test other crimes face?
No, we do not tell a robbery victim that their silence proves they were not robbed, or read an unreported break-in as evidence the house was never entered. The credibility test is reserved for this harm, and it runs in a loop with the funnel. Survivors decline to report in part because they expect not to be believed. The system's low completion rate confirms the expectation, and the demand then cites the low reporting as proof the harm is exaggerated. The attrition manufactures the silence, and the silence is offered back as the verdict.
The demand also assumes the institution is a neutral venue.
Sometimes it is not, and the news supplies the reminders. As this is written, Ontario's independent police watchdog, the Special Investigations Unit, has charged a serving Toronto officer with sexual offences involving a girl. He is charged, not convicted. The allegations are unproven, and the presumption of innocence holds. And this case takes no position on his guilt and builds nothing on it. It is noted for one narrow, structural reason. The institution a survivor is told to walk into is one whose own members can be, and sometimes are, the subject of the same allegations. That is not a claim about all officers. It is a reason the venue is not automatically neutral.
And the rigor the loudest version skips?
In this instance, the oversight worked as designed. The police service says it referred the complaint to the watchdog and suspended the officer the same day, and it was the independent unit, not the police investigating themselves, that laid the charges. So the example cuts two ways. It shows the institution is not neutral. It also shows that a mechanism for accountability exists, and here moved. The honest reading holds both. The venue is not above the harm, and it is not simply a wall.
Build the case for reporting at its strongest.
It is real, and a survivor deserves it, stated honestly. A report can be the thing that corroborates a later complaint and stops someone from offending again. Serial predation is often broken only because one person came forward. Due process, the presumption of innocence, the standard of proof, protects the wrongly accused, and it is a feature, not a bug, that conviction is hard. Oversight bodies do sometimes act, and many survivors who report describe it, despite everything, as the right choice for them. None of that is in question here.
And yet,
Grant all of it. The narrow claim survives because it was never "don't report" and never "the system always fails." It is that the demand, if you were really raped, you would press charges, misdescribes the choice it insists on. It treats a path the system completes about 1 time in 10 as the obvious default, and reads the survivor's realistic assessment of that path as a defect of character. The honest version of the advice would carry the truth with it. Here is what reporting can do. Here is how steep and costly the path often is, and here is why either choice can be reasonable. The laundering is in dropping the second half.
the post that pointed here ends on a verdict. This is why we don't go to the police. It is a real position, voiced from real grievance, and it is carried here as a named lens, attributed and not adopted. The series declines the generalization for the same reason it declines every collective attribution. The evidence includes an independent watchdog laying charges, which is precisely not the police burying their own. A slogan that reads, "Don't go to the police," off a case where the oversight system moved, is doing the mirror image of the move this case names.
collapsing a structural picture into a single, total conclusion.
So where does the line fall?
Between the grievance and the generalization. The grievance is documented and serious. The funnel is real, the credibility test is real, the venue is not always safe. The generalization, that no one should ever report, that every institution is the same wall, is not supported by the same evidence, and adopting it would launder a complicated reality into a slogan. Honor the first, refuse the second. The opposite lens is carried too, that the system, with its hard-won due process and independent oversight, is broadly working. This case adjudicates neither verdict. It fixes the narrower thing both sides talk past, the demand that makes the survivor pay for the gap.
Name it.
There is a harm that is common and badly underreported. There is a justice process that, by the state's own count, completes about 1 reported case in 10 and is steepest exactly where the assault is most common, close to home. And there is a demand, repeated until it sounds neutral, that treats entering that process as the obvious thing and reads any hesitation as a confession. The integration is a survivor handed the bill for an institutional shortfall and told the shortfall is theirs. If it were real, you would have pressed charges. The procedure is the costume. The disbelief is the body.
And the reading test?
Report or don't report is a decision that belongs to the person harmed, made with the real numbers in view, not with a credibility test pre-loaded against them. As the Dignity edition put it, of another coerced option. A choice is only free if the alternatives are real. A remedy is only available if being believed, surviving the process, and a real chance of conviction are on the table. The numbers say that, for most, they often are not. So when you next hear, "Why didn't you just go to the police?" put the demand beside the funnel. Ask what the process actually delivers, at what cost, and to whom. And notice, the question is almost always pointed at the person with the least power in the room, never at the institution with the most. If the advice carries its own success rate, it is honest. If it hides the rate and bills your silence as proof, it is not a question about what happened to you. It is a test you were set up to fail.